Hey guys, Dr. Whitney Kosters, Professor of English, here to help you understand Robert Frost's poem, Birches. In fact, I'm only making this video because a viewer reached out to me and asked me to help her with a specific question that appears on the ICSE exam, which is an exam that I know a lot of people have to take and pass. And that question is, Frost uses many literary devices in his poetry. Identify any two such devices that are used in the poem Birches and explain their significance in detail. Obviously, this is a question that I think a lot of students are asked to consider when studying this poem. So if you want a brief summary of the poem, some of its themes, and a good answer to include on your exam, then stick around and subscribe to my channel so that you can continue to get help with writing, literary analyses, and summaries. You know, in general, poetry is a more challenging genre for people to read and analyze, so I'm going to give you a summary of the poem first because, let's face it, if you don't even know what's going on in a poem, you're definitely not going to be able to analyze it. Let's first start with what even a birch is. It is a type of tall tree, as you can see here in this photo. And in this poem, a man looks at birches that have been bent by ice storms, and he thinks of the clicking and cracking sounds they make as the ice melts and falls onto the ground. After so much pressure bending them, the birches never stand upright again. Now, despite knowing that the birches have been bent by harsh weather, the man likes to imagine that they've been bent by a boy playing on them. And this boy, he imagines, tired of his chores and having no one to play with, carefully climbs to the very top of these tall birches and strategically flings himself down to the ground. The speaker says that he was once a boy who did this, and so when life becomes too much or too hard for him, he remembers the days when he used to be a swinger of birches, because it's then that he can imagine himself climbing these birch trees toward heaven and eventually be brought down to earth where he can start anew. So this poem explores the theme of rebirth and rejuvenation through the connection with nature. And it does so by treating the birches as one big metaphor for the playfulness, imagination, and creativity that we all have as children. So this metaphor is the first literary device that we'll explore together in detail. The speaker calls out what we feel as adults from time to time. You know, that life can be challenging, hard, rigid, burdensome, and exhausting. And this is symbolized in the poem by the straighter, darker trees that stand amidst the bent birches. And it's discussed outright in the simile here when the speaker says, "And life is too much like a pathless wood, where your face burns and tickles with the cobwebs broken across it, and one eye is weeping from a twig's having lashed across it open." So as adults, we tend to lose our spontaneity, creativity, joy, and our connection to the earth. We are so bogged down by our responsibilities, hardships, and the daily grind that we sometimes lose sight of the more important, purer things. Children, though, are much different. They are lighthearted, innocent, and freer, and the speaker seeks out his inner child within himself by remembering his own birch swinging days. This is why, despite recognizing the reality that the birches have been bent by a harsh ice storm, symbolic of the challenges we weather in life at times, the speaker leans into a more creative and beautiful narrative by transforming a storm into a picturesque, playful, and unstructured moment for a young boy. He even says, "One by one, the boy subdued his father's trees by writing them down over and over again until he took the stiffness out of them, and not one but hung limp, not one was left for him to conquer." I interpret this line as the boy's playfulness conquering the rigidity, the stiffness, and the stuffiness of life, and his lively spirit making the trees, and thus life, more flexible. Now, the speaker doesn't just transform the ice storm into a child's playful moment. He also employs the literary device simile to further transform these bent trees into a beautiful aesthetic image, comparing the birches to girls on hands and knees who throw their hair before them over their heads to dry in the sun. This is such a carefree and lively act, and I think it's meant to make the reader feel a sense of lightheartedness as well. In other words, when the speaker feels like life is burdening him, he finds peace and beauty within nature. He transforms harsh moments into beautiful, cathartic ones. For him, the birch trees are a pathway to heaven, during which he can cleanse himself of the difficult times in life so that he may return rebirthed or happier, more carefree, and less stifled. And it's important to note that he's not using the birches as an escape from his burdens. He insists on returning to earth because, as he says, it is the right place for love. So earth is not a bad place. It can just sometimes be too much for all of us, and so we must find a way to go and come back. After all, you can't always be jumping on trees, living in your imagination, but you also can't carry the weight of the world on your shoulders all the time either. So the birch trees are used as an extended metaphor to suggest that we all need to maintain a healthy balance between our busy lives in nature, reality, and imagination, because it's a space where we can think, reset, and figuratively be rebirthed. Now, the second literary device that I want to discuss in detail is Frost's use of alliteration, or the repetition of the same consonant sound in quick succession. Why do writers even want to employ the same sound in poetry? Well, poetry is a much more expressive genre of writing, so it's meant to stir in the reader an emotional response. In fact, don't forget that literature is an art that is intended to remind us of our humanness, our feelings, experiences, and our connection to others. It is a very expressive form of art. And remember, in this poem, an older man is trying to reconnect with his younger self, his freer, more spontaneous, less jaded self. One way he does this is by capturing these moments, these memories, these emotions through the poetic reverberations that are created when similar sounds occur in the same space. Let me show you an example from the poem. The speaker says, "They click upon themselves as the breeze rises and turn many-colored as the stir cracks and crazes their enamel. Soon the sun's warmth makes them shed crystal shells, shattering and avalanching on the snow, crust such heaps of broken glass to sweep away, you'd think the inner dome of heaven had fallen." So one of the things you probably noticed in this poem and in what I just read to you is that the speaker directly speaks to us, referring to us as you. He says, "You'd think the inner dome of heaven had fallen, and you may see their trunks arching in the woods." In directly addressing us, the speaker involves us, asking us to see, hear, and feel the movements and sounds of the birches as he does in his imagination. By using the hard C sound over and over, click, colored, cracks, crazes, crust, and crystals, we can imagine the sparkling ice breaking open and cracking and falling to the ground with this beautiful clicking sound. And these sounds are intertwined with the sh sound with words like shed, shells, and shattering, imbuing us with the energy of the ice breaking and making us think of these birches releasing themselves from this stiff ice that had held them captive for so long. One of the major points of this poem is to remember the beauty of nature and the well-being one can find in it. So the speaker immerses our senses into these trees and allows us to break free from our own rigidity through these shattering and cracking sounds so that we ourselves may reimagine our own moments of freedom, peace, and creativity that are essential to reconnect with. Through these sounds, he's giving us the means to find that balance, even if we're not literally standing in the midst of hundreds of birch trees. And he's allowing us to connect with the emotions of our inner child, reminding us that it's in there in each of us. One reason that these answers would get you good marks is because they're not only detailed, but they include real examples from the poem, and they connect the two literary devices to the major theme of the poem. When you answer a question, you want to make sure that it's substantial and well-rounded. That means you should be able to take one small point of a text and demonstrate how it connects to or exemplifies or supports the work as a whole. I do hope that this short lecture helped you in understanding Birches a little bit better and understanding a couple of its literary devices. This is how I would address the exam question that I know many of you are expected to answer on your ICSE exam. So I do hope that this was useful for you. If it was, please give this video a rating and share in the comments some of the other literary devices that you found in this poem to further help anyone watching. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you guys in the next round.